I was closing the classroom door when I heard a strange whisper. The children I had just guided to their desks stood frozen, staring into nothingness. One of them turned abruptly towards me, eyes lifeless, and a cold, trembling fear ran through my body. Silence suddenly filled the entire hallway. It should have been an ordinary Monday morning at Blackwood Elementary. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew your parents' names before you even met them. I had taught here for nearly a decade, and mornings were usually predictable. The bell, the chatter, the rustle of notebooks. But today felt off. I stepped back into the classroom, heart hammering, and called out, "Tommy, are you okay?" The boy didn't answer. His lips didn't move, yet the whisper had come from him, or at least I thought it had. Another child, Emily, twitched as though she had felt a breeze, but the windows were closed. I scanned the room, counting heads, praying it was just a prank. 10 children, 20? No, 21. A couple of desks were empty, though I was sure I didn't let anyone leave. Panic prickled at the edge of my mind. Something was wrong, really wrong. Then I noticed the first peculiar detail, their eyes. They weren't blank exactly, but distant, like they were staring through me, through the walls, into some place I couldn't see. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that no one had blinked in several seconds. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Everyone, eyes on me, please." My words seemed swallowed by the air itself. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, and then, softly, faintly, a chorus of whispers drifted to me from the corners of the room. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakably urgent, almost pleading. I backed away from the desk, my hands trembling. Okay, stay calm," I whispered to myself. My professional instincts screamed at me to take control, but my body refused to move naturally. The whispers grew louder, swirling around the room as if the air itself had become alive. Emily twitched again, and this time she took a single, slow step toward the classroom door. Her eyes never left mine. Another child followed, then another. A procession of quiet, blank stars advancing without sound, without hesitation. My chest tightened. I tried to call out to stop them, but my voice failed me. And then the door at the end of the hallway creaked open on its own. Not gently. It slammed back against the wall as if pushed by some invisible force. The children froze for a moment, then turned toward it, their movements eerily synchronized, almost unnatural. A low hum began beneath the whispering, a vibration in the floor, in the walls, in the air itself. I wanted to run, to grab one of them, to scream, but my legs wouldn't obey. My own reflection in the window pane showed a pale, wide-eyed teacher gripping the edge of her desk like a lifeline. My mind raced. Is this real? Am I seeing this? Or am I losing my mind? A sudden rustle behind me made me whip around. Nothing. The room was empty of motion, except for the children's slow, deliberate advance toward the mysterious door. The whispers swirled faster now, forming almost coherent syllables. I couldn't understand them, but the sense of urgency was unmistakable. They were calling something, and I knew, deep down, that if I stepped closer, if I tried to intervene, I might not be able to turn back. The bell rang, shrill and piercing, but no one moved to answer it. The silence returned, heavier this time, pressing against my ears and chest. And somewhere just beyond the doorway, I felt it, a presence waiting, patient and unseen, waiting for the quiet to spread. I swallowed hard and whispered under my breath, more to myself than anyone else, "This isn't normal, not normal at all." The next morning, Blackwood Elementary felt different. The sun had risen over the town's sleepy streets, but it couldn't chase away the heavy sense of wrongness I carried from yesterday. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to nerves or imagination. But as I stepped into my classroom, the truth hit me like a cold slap. More children had gone quiet. At first, it was subtle. Liam, normally the loudest in class, didn't answer when I asked him to read aloud. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I frowned, thinking perhaps he had a sore throat. But then I noticed his eyes, vacant, unfocused, as if his mind had slipped away without his body following. Next was Sarah. She had a habit of humming while she worked, a soft tune that often floated through the room. Today, her pencil scratched against paper, but the hum was gone. When I knelt to ask if she was feeling okay, she turned toward me slowly, a faint smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. And still no sound. A cold knot of fear tightened in my chest. This wasn't normal. Not for any child, not in any school. And then I noticed the whispering again, soft, fleeting, just beyond comprehension, as if the walls themselves were trying to speak. I spun around, half expecting a vent or an air duct to be the source. Nothing. By the time the bell rang, 3 more children had joined the silent ranks. Parents began calling, their voices anxious over the phone. Is Tommy okay? Has Emily eaten breakfast? Why isn't Liam talking? Their words barely penetrated my own growing panic. I wanted to reassure them, to say, it's fine, it's just a phase, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. During lunch, I watched from the teacher's lounge as the children moved through the cafeteria in strange, measured patterns. They didn't laugh, didn't speak, didn't even glance at one another. Their movements were synchronized, almost ritualistic, like they were following invisible instructions. I felt my stomach churn as whispers seemed to echo in the corners, faint yet urgent. I tried to shake the fear, telling myself it was some weird psychological contagion or group game gone wrong. But that explanation shattered when I caught sight of young Daniel standing near the trash cans. He wasn't staring at anything familiar, just straight ahead, blank-eyed. And then, slowly, impossibly slowly, he raised a trembling hand to the ceiling, as though feeling something invisible there. The whispers coalesced into syllables I couldn't understand. I could feel the words pressing into my skull, an urgent call that seemed to seep into my bones. It wasn't coming from any one child, but from all of them at once, and somehow from nowhere. My breath caught. I wanted to turn and run, but the walls of the lounge seemed to press inward, holding me in place. I ran to the principal's office, hoping for guidance, but she sat frozen behind her desk, staring at the empty halls. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice trembling, though no one else was in the building. And then I did. The whispering surged around me, rising to a frantic crescendo. It wasn't just coming from the children now. It was everywhere, curling around the corners of the hallway, slithering over the lockers, hiding in the light fixtures. And the children, my students, innocent and small, were moving toward the echo, their faces calm, serene even, but their silence had teeth. I realized I wasn't just witnessing something inexplicable. I was watching something claim them, one by one. And the thought hit me like ice. If I didn't figure out what this was, if I didn't act fast, I could be next. I grabbed a notebook from my desk, scribbling frantic notes about the whispers, the children's strange synchronization, the cold chill that seemed to follow them. And then, as if in response, Daniel slowly turned toward me, his expression blank yet intense. I swore I saw the faintest glimmer of recognition, or was it warning? I had to get answers. I had to understand. But somewhere deep in the echoing hallways, a truth waited, patient and relentless. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that Blackwood Elementary would never feel ordinary again. By midweek, the whispers had grown louder, and the silence of my classroom had become suffocating. It wasn't just the children anymore. The air itself seemed charged, vibrating with something unseen. Every time I tried to speak, my words felt swallowed, distorted, as if the building itself had learned to ignore me. I had started taking notes obsessively, scribbling every odd movement, every glance, every minute pause and sound. I watched the children carefully, noting the ones whose eyes had gone completely blank. The phenomenon was spreading like wildfire. First one, then 2, then a half-dozen students moving through their day as if they were shadows of themselves. During math class, I noticed Liam absent from his desk. At first, I thought he had slipped out to the bathroom. But as I looked around, the other children seemed altered, their attention drawn to a corner of the room that held nothing. My stomach sank when I turned to see Liam standing near the window, staring out into the empty playground. His lips moved slightly, forming words I couldn't hear. And then, almost imperceptibly, he vanished. I blinked. The window was empty. My heart raced, and I could hear my own pulse thundering in my ears. I ran to the playground, thinking perhaps he had slipped outside, but the yard was vacant. Not a single student in sight, except, impossibly, the whispers. They were everywhere, pressing against me, curling around the edges of my vision. I tried to call out to the children, any of them, but my voice cracked. It was as if the silence in the room had extended its reach, pulling at the edges of my words. The principal appeared in the hallway, her expression pale. They aren't gone," she said in a trembling whisper. "They're somewhere else. I don't know where." That night I could hardly sleep. Images of blank-eyed children haunted every corner of my mind. And then I heard it soft at first, a thread of sound, almost like a child humming. But it grew, layer upon layer, into the same chorus of whispers from the classroom. I could feel them in my chest, pressing, tugging, almost coaxing me to come closer. By Thursday morning, things had escalated. Emily and Sarah, two of my brightest students, refused to answer questions. Their movements had grown more deliberate, almost ceremonial. I watched them walk in slow, synchronized patterns across the classroom, their heads turning in unison toward some invisible point on the far wall. The whispers came from everywhere and nowhere, pressing urgency into my skull. And then it happened again. Emily vanished. One moment she was standing near the blackboard, the next, nothing. I screamed, a sound I could barely hear over the rising chorus. Some of the other children paused, blank faces, turning toward the empty space where she had stood. I realized with a sickening certainty that this was not random. The whispers were guiding them, pulling them somewhere. I tried to rally the remaining students, to gather them and escape the school, but they moved with impossible coordination, slipping past me like water through fingers. And I noticed something worse. The air itself seemed to shimmer around them, a distortion I couldn't explain, like reality bending in their presence. In desperation, I turned to old records of the town, searching for anything that might explain this. Blackwood had its share of strange legends, old wives' tales about the forest that bordered the town, and the abandoned radio tower on the hill. They were stories parents told to keep children from wandering. But the whispers, oh, the whispers were coming from inside the walls of the school, from every corner, and yet not from anywhere tangible. By the time the bell rang, only half the class remained. The whispers were louder than ever, wrapping around me like a living thing. I could feel a pull, not just toward the missing children, but toward the doorway of some other place, beyond the ordinary, beyond comprehension. And I knew, with a deep, icy certainty, that if I followed, I might never return. As I sat at my desk, heart hammering, I understood the truth of what was happening. This was not just a silence. It was a call. And whatever answered it, whatever drew the children away, was patient and relentless. And it had noticed me. Friday morning arrived like a slow, creeping fog. Blackwood Elementary had never felt heavier, the air thick with an invisible pressure that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. I tried to maintain calm as I entered the classroom, but my stomach churned with dread. The children, those who remained, stood in their places, eerily still, eyes distant and unblinking. I decided I had to confront this. I stepped toward Liam's empty desk, whispering his name, and a shiver raced up my spine. The whispers had returned, louder now, surrounding me from all sides. I couldn't locate their source. They moved, shifting and curling as though the very walls were alive. Then it happened. A shadow flickered across the far corner of the room. My pulse spiked. I froze, watching as it stretched and stretched, elongating unnaturally, then recoiled into something almost humanoid. My breath caught. I knew immediately. This wasn't a trick of the light or fatigue or stress. Something else, something not of our world, was here. Emily stepped forward. Her movement was deliberate, graceful, yet terrifyingly unnatural. I opened my mouth to call her back, but the words froze. The shadow turned its gaze toward her, and the whispers swelled into a cacophony of indecipherable syllables. I could feel the vibrations through my bones, and I stumbled backward, tripping over a chair. The shadow recoiled slightly, and I caught my first glimpse of its form. A mass of black mist, shifting and writhing, punctuated with faint, ghostly shapes, faces, arms. It moved with purpose, and for a horrifying moment, I felt it reach for Emily. Her lips moved, forming silent words, her eyes widening as if screaming in another dimension. I lunged, grabbing her shoulder, trying to pull her back, but the moment I touched her, the shadow recoiled and she froze, her gaze locked into nothing. Then, impossibly, she vanished. My scream echoed in the empty classroom, swallowed instantly by the heavy, humming air. The remaining children backed away, some glancing toward the far wall as though sensing a presence I could not see. A low vibration pulsed beneath my feet, spreading through the floor, crawling up my spine. I staggered toward the door, desperate to leave, but the whispers intensified, now sounding almost like laughter, childlike, yet distorted, hollow. I reached the hallway, only to find the principal frozen mid-step, eyes wide and vacant. "It's inside the walls," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's taking them, one by one." Her words did little to calm me. I felt the pull now, stronger than ever, an irresistible tug toward the source of the whispers. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but my curiosity, my need to protect them, anchored me in place. And then I heard it, the first clear word formed not by lips, but by the whispering that now surrounded me. "Come." My skin crawled. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a command, patient, insistent, impossible to ignore. Desperation overrode fear. I ran back into the classroom, searching frantically for any remaining children. They huddled in clusters, vacant-eyed, silent, their movements synchronized, drawn toward some invisible point in the far corner. I reached out to a boy named Daniel, hoping to pull him away. His hand passed through mine, chilling me to the bone. He didn't even flinch. The shadow shifted, solidifying slightly, its misty tendrils curling outward. I realized then the truth. It wasn't just a force of nature. It was aware, patient, waiting. And it had learned to use the children as conduits, pulling them into somewhere else. I stumbled backward toward the door, hearing a soft, almost melodic whisper echo through the classroom. "You're next." I froze, my heart hammering, realizing the full weight of the danger. I wasn't just observing this phenomenon. I was trapped in it, and the entity knew I was the only one left capable of resisting. The hallway outside shimmered, subtle at first, then more insistently, like reality itself was bending. I could feel it calling me, tugging at the edges of my mind, teasing me toward the unknown. And in that moment, I understood. The quiet wasn't simply absence of sound. It was a doorway, and it had noticed me. By Monday, the school felt like a ghost town. Only a handful of children remained, and even they moved like shadows, silent and distant. Parents had begun arriving in a panic, but no one could explain what was happening. Some whispered about viruses, others about mass hysteria, but I knew better. This was something else entirely. I walked through the empty hallways, my footsteps echoing unnaturally. The whispers had followed me, faint at first, then growing louder, curling around the corners and sliding over the lockers. I could feel their urgency pressing into my mind, demanding attention, pulling me toward something I couldn't see. In the cafeteria, I found the principal hunched over a table with her hands shaking. "It's spreading," she said, voice barely audible. "Every child, every room, it's reaching for them." Her eyes, usually sharp and decisive, were glassy, vacant, like the children themselves. I turned back toward the classrooms, my chest tightening with fear. The remaining students had gathered near the far wall, staring at some invisible point. Their movements were coordinated, almost ritualistic. I tried to reach them, but the air seemed thicker around them, a barrier I couldn't penetrate. Then I saw it, an unnatural shimmer along the edges of the wall, faint but unmistakable. A pull, subtle at first, then stronger, tugging at my mind, my very being. I realized this was the source of the whispers, the force drawing the children away. It wasn't just in the walls, it was alive, aware, patient, and it had learned to use them. I remembered the old legends of Blackwood, the abandoned radio tower on the hill, stories of spirits luring the curious, the tales parents told to keep children indoors. I hadn't believed them, not until now. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. These children were mine, and I was the only one who could fight for them. The whispers surged, louder now, wrapping around me like invisible fingers. Daniel, one of the remaining students, stepped forward, eyes blank yet focused. I reached for him, but he passed right through my hands, moving toward the shimmer. Panic clawed at my chest. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the thickening silence, replaced by the chorus of whispers that seemed to echo from every corner. I realized then that the quiet wasn't a void, it was a signal, a door, and the entity behind it had noticed me. It was testing me, pulling, probing, waiting to see if I would resist. My hands shook, my heart raced, but I couldn't let fear dominate. I needed a plan, a way to understand what I was up against. Outside the classroom windows, the sky had darkened unnaturally, even though it was midday. The air shimmered faintly, like heat above asphalt, and the whispers seemed to bleed through the walls. The children edged closer, drawn to the unknown. I swallowed hard and whispered to myself, I have to stop this, but how? Every step I took toward them felt heavier, the pull stronger. And in that moment, I knew one thing with chilling clarity. I was running out of time. The hallway was empty, but the whispers followed me, wrapping around my mind like cold fingers. The remaining children moved in perfect silence, their eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I could feel the pull now, stronger, insistent, like the air itself was dragging me toward the far corner of the classroom. Daniel stepped forward, hand outstretched. I lunged, desperate to stop him, but my hands passed through him as though he were made of mist. A low, humming vibration ran through the floor, through my bones. The shimmer at the wall grew, bending light, distorting the air. I realized then the truth. The quiet wasn't just absence of sound. It was a doorway, and it had learned to use the children as guides. I swallowed my fear, heart hammering. I couldn't leave them, couldn't let this force claim anymore. With a trembling hand, I stepped closer to the shimmer, the whispers intensifying into a chorus of urgent, almost pleading syllables. The air thickened, pressing against me, yet I forced myself forward. Every instinct screamed to flee, but I knew I had to confront it, to face whatever waited beyond the invisible threshold. And somewhere deep in the echoing silence, I felt it watching me, patient and relentless. I stepped through the shimmer, and the whispers swallowed me whole. The classroom, the hallway, the world I knew, it all blurred into a gray, vibrating space where time and sound had no meaning. The children were there, floating silently, their eyes empty but aware, guiding me forward. A cold realization struck me. This place didn't take them, it transformed them. And now it had noticed me, testing, waiting, drawing me deeper. I tried to reach out to speak, but my words dissolved into the hum. Somewhere, far beyond the gray, I felt a pull stronger than fear, a presence patient and relentless. It whispered my name, not as a question, but a command. I understood then that leaving was impossible. Escaping would never break the silence. And as the echoes wrapped around me, I knew with certainty. The quiet didn't end here. It would follow, patient and eternal, waiting for the next voices to answer its call.